5 fundamentals that I look for in every great real estate deal, and so should you. Elements of the first 4 should be in every real estate deal you consider. If you can create an opportunity for the 5th element to be applied to a deal, you are a boss level in your market, and well done. What I'm going to share in this video are the fundamentals I believe make for a great real estate deal. I believe these are universal. Investors will have their own criteria and terms, and everyone's will differ, but it's important to know what your criteria and terms are, including what type of property you're seeking, what's your budget, what's your required yield and return. Every investor is going to have a different requirement, but this video is not about terms and criteria. It's about 5 elements every investor should look for, no matter their experience, their budget, their risk tolerance, the yield they require, or the location of that property they're seeking. So let's get on with the 5 elements I look for within a perfect property deal, and so should you too. Number 1, the ability to add value. If I cannot see a way to add value to a property that I control, I don't think there's a point in me buying it. I need to be confident that I can add value with my knowledge, my experience, or know the people who can actually add value for me. They say making money on a property happens on the day you buy, and that is kind of true, but adding value doesn't have to happen on day 1. It can happen over a year or 2. But you need to know that you can add considerable value if you follow a set plan over a set time frame. Adding value can happen in many different ways, including refurbishment of a property, improving a legal title, also re-gearing a commercial lease, adding additional floor space, changing the use to a more desirable or more valuable use, changing zoning, achieving planning permission, and the list goes on. I've even heard of investors changing the name of a development to improve the value, and it's not unheard of that developers or investors will actually change the entrance of a development onto a more desirable street to increase the value. There's a very famous development in Dublin that a wall was built around it and a bridge was constructed that changed the address and changed the postal address of that property and that site, adding millions to the development just by changing the postal address. There are countless ways to add value to a property, but the important element is that you know how to add value to the property before you buy it. Perhaps with your experience, your insight over the market, perhaps that gives you a competitive edge, or you know people that can actually provide that insight for you and give you a competitive edge over the market. But it is important that you know you can add value to a certain property before you actually buy it. Number 2, multiple uses. I always want a plan B, and this applies to commercial and residential property. It's more obvious in terms of commercial property. If you buy an office block, you need to know that you have a few options on tenants. The more options you have and the more demand that there is there for that particular type of use, the better. But it's also great if you know you can convert that office into a different use if needed. But what happens if it's a retail unit or a very specialized retailer? Let's just take IKEA for example. I'm not saying that they're not a blue chip tenant, but let's take worst case scenario. Let's say they move totally online or they move to a bigger unit down the road. You would find it extremely hard sourcing another replacement tenant for the boxes that they currently operate in terms of that specialized use. Also, you have to consider what's happening to malls all around the US. Many investors are scrambling or scratching their heads to find alternative uses for those malls, and it's quite hard. Sometimes they're being converted into college, sometimes they're even being used for 80s movies, but the use cases are quite limited, and therefore it is a factor you would have to consider if you were going to buy one. I've also seen it with development sites. Developers and investors might acquire a certain site with an idea in mind to develop something that is marketable or is in demand at that time. But by the time they actually get their planning permission, the market has slightly shifted. I've seen it in cases where people have tried to develop shopping centers only to find that the council have granted planning permission for another shopping centre a mile down the road, and therefore their business case has gone out the window, and perhaps the site isn't suitable for housing or there's no office demand in the area for that particular site, and their investment and plan goes out the window. So it's always important to have a backup plan. I've looked at hotel sites on behalf of developers, and I've created development appraisals for hotels, but I would also create a development appraisal for a build to rent option or an owner occupier apartment complex, because I think it's always important to have a backup plan. And it's not just commercial. Residential also has its risk as well. You do need to consider multiple uses. While the risks are slightly less, there still is risks there for you to consider. In terms of multiple uses, perhaps it's just considering multiple different types of tenants. If you're in a city, perhaps that risk is quite low because there's lots of different opportunities to find tenants. However, if the property is based around, or the rental market in a certain location is based around one particular major employer or one particular college, what happens if that employer or college closed down? That could have major impacts on your property and your ability to rent that property. It's also important to consider from a holiday let point of view. Some areas can be extremely trendy, but they can go out of favor with tourists. And this is something you need to consider as well. Basically, don't put all your chips on one tenant, have multiple different options. Number 3, increase income. The ability to increase the rental income over time is extremely important, and even more important in times of high inflation. Rental caps on residential property could devalue the overall property and reduce the real income over time. The ability to increase rent on commercial property is extremely important. Most commercial leases allow for the rents to be reviewed every 5 years, and it is a great way to increase the value of the property as well. Knowing and having the ability to increase the income of an investment property is key to good property investment. If you don't know how you're going to increase the value of a property, perhaps over a 5-year period, I would question why you would even consider buying that property, and perhaps it's a better time to sell. Number 4, marketability. If you don't know who and how you're going to sell the property to in the future, you shouldn't buy it. If you know you're buying a property with questionable title, you have to know or be confident that you have the ability to fix that, to make sure it is marketable in the future, and you have to be extremely confident that you have the ability to fix that issue. You also have to be confident that there will be a market for that asset in the future. Think, will there be a market for this type of property in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years? Think of retail. Will there be a market for certain types of retail in 20 years' time? So they're the 4 top things that I would look for, or you should consider outside general due diligence when you're considering buying a property. Before I share number 5, if you are interested in real estate investing, I put out videos all the time, so consider subscribing to the channel. I have got an increase in requests for one-on-one consulting recently, so I have dropped a link in the description. And also make sure you do subscribe to our mailing list. If you can manage to tick off elements of 1 to 4 in a deal, that's amazing. But if you can add the next one to a deal, you are playing with the elites. Number 5, get a blue chip tenant to sign up to a long-term lease with rental increases before you buy a vacant building. As the value for commercial property is in the lease, you can buy vacant properties at a discount. But if you know the requirements of a blue chip tenant in advance and can agree favorable lease terms, you can buy a vacant property at a discount and be very confident that you will increase the value of that property considerably the day you sign. This does require a lot of moving parts, but if you can get everything aligned, secure a vacant property at a discount, knowing that a prime tenant will lease it from you, you will have major money going in. And the bonus, sometimes tenants will even do the refurbishment costs. You might ask, how do you actually create such a deal? Well, it's not easy, but nothing ever worthwhile is. First, you need to know what the blue chip tenants' requirements are, including the size, their price per square foot, their lease terms, and where they want to locate. You also need a good relationship with them. Then you need to find a property that matches their requirements and agree a deal without anyone knowing. It can also work when a blue chip tenant finds a property themselves, agree a deal, and ask an investor to step in on their behalf and buy it, and they'll lease it back from them. To make this happen, you need a good relationship with the tenant, and they need to trust you. If you want me to expand on any one of those 5 elements individually, let me know in the comments below, but that's it for this video. I will have a video out in the next few days, but if you can't wait, perhaps YouTube might suggest a video that you will like here. As always, thanks for watching.